Hello, I'm Jorge Getoso. Welcome to a new program. On today's show, the government of President Trump releases the largest environmental deregulation in half century. What could be the consequences? We ask our guest, Javier Sierra, spokesman of the Sierra Club, the largest and most influential environmental organization in the United States. Javier Sierra, a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Javier, the rationale behind this new deregulation that President Trump is announcing is going to help facilitate the constructions of many projects that has been delayed for years in courts and also in the future. Do you believe that is a valid argument?
No, it's not. The real intention here is to pay another tribute to the corporate polluters who are behind his administration. What he's trying to do here is to ignore the protections that we all need to have in order to have clean water, clean air, and a viable climate. And the most relevant part of all this when it comes to us Latinos, Hispanics here in the United States, is that this kind of project, this kind of ignoring environmental protections, what happens is our communities are the ones who end up paying the consequences. We disproportionately suffer the consequences of air pollution, water pollution, the contamination coming from fossil fuels like oil, coal, and gas. What he's trying to do is to give a blank check to the worst polluters in the United States, and sooner or later we will pay the consequences. On one hand. On the other hand, he's trying to do all these rollbacks of all these protections as if we did not have a planetary emergency because of the climate crisis. He ignores it completely, and it's really comfortable for someone to ignore the problem. He said it's like Chinese hoax or something like that, right? Which is usually what he says. And when he ignores the problem, then they said, okay, let's just continue things, the business as usual. And that is absolutely immoral.
That will let him, for example, give them the okay, the green light to projects like pipelines, mines, and also airports, for example. So there's a lot of money that could be made for these huge corporations that are behind this. And that could be endorsement for his re-election, for example.
Well, he already has the endorsement of the polluters, that's for sure. I mean, he's had it from the beginning. He is a polluter. He's a political polluter in the national scene. I think you said something that is really important right now. Who is going to profit from this? Who is going to benefit from this? His friends, his polluting friends. You see, it's not going to be the community. All these projects should be part of the Green New Deal. We're talking about open the doors to the green and renewable energy economy. Who in their right mind would try to build a monster pipeline, for instance, at Keystone XL, from the tar sands in Canada all the way down to the ports in Texas? There's absolutely no need for that. We already have all the oil that we need. What we need to do is keep all that oil. In fact, the science is telling us we need to leave at least 2/3 of the fossil fuel reserves underground. That's the way we will avoid the worst consequences of the climate change. But as I said before, Mr. Trump, his administration, and his backers are acting as if we did not have a planetary emergency because of the climate crisis.
According to the law, there's 60 days to appeal against this law. Do you think that eventually all the appeals could make that the law stop to be in effect?
Well, you can take that to the bank right now, because we are already fighting this thing in the courts. And we have been fighting all these rollbacks and all this destruction of the protections, environmental protections, since day one of his administration. And we have been very successful. Not only the Sierra Club, but many other organizations like ours, community organizations, and so forth, that have been very successful, at the court.
And these type of deregulations also adds up to previous deregulations, for example, regarding the gas limitations in the cars and the emissions, and also the coal industry. Mm-hmm. So there is a trend here that he's trying to dismantle everything that he can. According to a report of the New York Times published in November, mm-hmm. it says that 95%
protection.
Protections has been
Rollback.
regulated. Basically, the critics and also the opposition says that he has destroyed the EPA, the agency that protects the environment.
Well, he has been successful in many respects in terms of rolling back all these protections, but we have been even more successful at the courts stopping these crazy rollbacks of so many protections, as you said, more than 95. Good things about all this is that even though at the federal level things are going really bad, and this is the worst environmental president in the history of the United States. At the state, municipal, and local level, we are being extremely successful. And I'll give you an example. California, which is the 5th economy in the world right now, has already committed itself to completely eliminate the use of dirty fuels to generate energy from here to the year 2050. If California, which is the richest state in the state, can commit itself to such a really lofty goal, any other state in the United States can do the same thing. As a matter of fact, at least 7 of them have done the same thing. And any rich country, a developed country in the world can do exactly the same. So we are being successful in that regard. At the local, at the state, and municipal level, we are doing really, really well.
And his background is he's naming people, for example, in agencies like the EPA, like Scott Pruitt, that they have a background of disrespecting totally the environment and the climate change. So basically he's putting the enemy inside the agency that's supposed to be defending the interests of the majority.
Every hen house has its fox right now in the Trump administration. And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is perhaps the most glaring example of this really shameless way of abusing the health of the public and of course the health of the climate. And the corruption within the EPA has been this is a matter of a record, a public record right now. But then again, yes, they have been successful at the federal level trying to roll back all these protections. But at the state level, at the municipal level, and local level, we have been extremely successful. More than 130 cities and municipalities in the United States have already committed themselves to generating all its energy through clean and renewable energy sources, excuse me, like solar, like wind, and geothermal, and so forth. Unfortunately, we have the worst environmental president in the history of the United States, but at the same time, we are advancing really fast in terms of leaving behind this economy of dirty fuels.
We can point that if you want, the executive branch is corrupted according to what, for example, the Senator Bernie Sanders point out. But Bernie Sanders also said that, you know, at the Congress level, he said most of the congressmen are bought by the huge interest regarding, for example, the environment. So basically, it's not only President Trump, it's the whole power, the whole structure of power in the U.S.?
Well, unfortunately, the fossil fuel industry has a huge influence in Congress. It's one of the most powerful lobbies that we have there. And they have practically bought a whole bunch of senators and representatives because of two really dreadful decisions by the Supreme Court. In the United States, money is a form of expression. And the one who has the most money has the most right to express themselves. So it's a form of bribery. That's basically what it boils down to, that we have all these corporations investing hundreds of millions of dollars in politicians. They buy them, and then the politicians do the buying. So.
In the last Democratic debate that we have watched recently, we have heard the issue of the climate change and the environment present that. For example, one of the candidates, Tom Steyer, which is a millionaire, said, in the case that I become the US president, the first day at the Oval Office I will declare a climate emergency. And also, in the case of the Senator Bernie Sanders, he brought up again the Green New Deal. The issue of environment and the issue of climate change is more present now in the US at all levels?
Yeah, of course, the awareness, the climate awareness is much higher because we have no choice. I mean, we turn on the TV, we see Australia, the whole continent in flames. We see examples of the climate crisis all over the globe. Yes, the awareness has increased exponentially, thank goodness. But I mean, it doesn't take for this gentleman to come and say that I'm going to declare a climate emergency. We already have a climate emergency. We have a planetary emergency going on right now. And it's not only them, as for instance, the European Union has already declared a climate emergency. And they have already committed themselves, and whenever it comes to finances or political decisions, everything will be around this declaration of climate emergency. So it is there, obviously, and we had to react and we had to act with urgency. We have no other choice. The United Nations already has warned us. They already warned us that from here to 2030, we had to reduce our climate change emissions by 45%.
Wow.
And from here to 2050, we had to completely eliminate the use of fossil fuels. So that's it. We already reaching tipping points. Australia is already reaching tipping points in terms of the climate. We cannot afford this. We must act in a decisive way because what is at stake right now is the future of our species.
When we reach the end of this presidential campaign between President Trump, that is going to be the candidate of the Republican Party, and whoever is going to be the Democrat candidate, the climate change is going to be one of the issues that could be at stake?
The difference will be stark differences between one and the other. We're going to have a person that is going to be committed to fighting the climate crisis, and we're going to have a complete denialist, one of the worst climate denialists in the world right now, which is Mr. Trump. The differences are going to be enormous. The good thing about all this is that the vast majority of the American public already acknowledge that we have a big problem right now, and then we had to confront it, and then we had to act in order to fight this climate change.
You and I live in Washington. We know that this youngster, Greta Thunberg, Swedish, she was a student, and suddenly on Fridays she decided to declare herself in strike, not go to school, precisely against all the damage that politicians and all over the world were doing to the environment. And the movement reached here, Washington, and now every Friday we have seen protests in front of precisely what you have behind you, the Congress. Tell us about that.
Greta Thunberg, and she started the whole thing. It was a year and a half ago. She just every Friday she went on strike, and she sat in front of the Swedish Parliament demanding climate action. So what she started with just one person herself now has become a global movement. Millions of boys and girls all over the world are teaching us the most relevant generational lesson in the history of humanity. And it makes me ashamed that I belong to the last generation that can do something really significant in terms of fighting climate change. Way too many members of our generation have been crossing their arms and ignoring this problem for way, way too long. And now it took for the kids, the ones who are really going to suffer the consequences of our inaction, to wake up and say, hey, no more of this. You playing with our future. And to tell you the truth, this is unique. No other person has been able to raise the climate awareness more than Greta Thunberg and his boys and girls all over the world.
Time magazine has declared her the Person of the Year, and people of your organization, of the Sierra Club, has been precisely on Fridays on these protests here.
On the past Friday, two members of our executive team were arrested in protest, along with 30 more people, along with really famous people like Martin Sheen, like Joaquin Phoenix, and many others.
Jane Fonda?
Jane Fonda, she was arrested at this Chase branch, far away from the Congress, but just because the protest is expanding itself. It's not only there to demand action. It's also we are going after the financial institutions that are making possible this runaway train that we have with all these polluters and all this fossil fuel industry. And let me mention this, which is I think is extremely relevant. BlackRock, which is the largest financial institution financing the fossil fuels, has declared that from now on, the climate change, the climate crisis, and being sustainable is going to be central to its lending and to its business. This is something revolutionary almost. We've been protesting against this institution for many, many years, and it has worked. What Greta Thunberg and the rest of the boys, is working. I mean, for the whole European Union to declare a climate emergency is really, really extraordinary.
So do you believe there's going to have an impact here regarding the congressmen?
It is already having a big impact. Not really at the federal level because of the person that we have in the White House right now. At the state, municipal, and local level, we are being extremely successful. As I said before, California right now is the fifth economy in the world, and it has already committed itself to 100% renewable and clean energy.
Confirming in terms of hard data of what's going on in the planet, NASA has released a report saying that 2019 was the hottest year since they take records, and the decade also was one of the hottest. So that is having an impact even in the oceans, for example.
Yes, it was actually last decade was the hottest ever recorded on planet Earth. And what we have also what we're seeing there is the oceans are the warmest since the dinosaur era, all right? And this is very dangerous because the sea level rise is one of the most dangerous part of the climate crisis. What we're seeing here is the ocean is absorbing between 70 and 80% of all the extra heat that is absorbing the planet right now. Were it not for this, were it not for the oceans, most of the planet would look like Australia looks right now. So, but of course, this is catastrophic in terms of the biodiversity of the oceans because it's increasing the acidification of the oceans, and therefore they're increasing the danger for animals like clams and oysters and crabs and so forth. Their structure, the outside of their body is made out of carbon. And if the oceans increase this acidity, what happens is this acidity dissolves this compound, these hard compounds, and these animals die. You see, we've seen already a huge decrease in the biodiversity of the ocean. So is one other aspect of the climate emergency that we are involved right now.
What about cases like Puerto Rico having earthquakes? We're seeing floodings. We're seeing, even in the U.S., any sort of climate change is already taking place now.
I'll give you an example, and this, of course, involved Puerto Rico. In the 20th century, we had a Category 5 hurricane once every 30, 60 years, okay? In the past 4 years, we have 5. It is happening. Look at what happened to Puerto Rico with Maria. I mean, that monster entered from the east, exited from the west, and it was just like almost like a nuclear bomb. It leveled practically the entire island. And let me mention this right now, because this is another shameful part of the Trump administration. They've been withholding the funds that were approved by Congress for the relief and the recovery of Puerto Rico. We're talking about almost $20 billion. Fortunately, after 2 years and some, $9 billion were released and were sent to Puerto Rico for the recovery. But we still have another $11 billion that should be already in the hands of Puerto Ricans to rebuild the island.
How concerned are you about what has been taking place since Donald Trump arrived to the Oval Office regarding climate change and environment?
The immoral Trump administration has been the worst environmental catastrophe that we've ever seen in this country. And he has done his very best to roll back almost 100 protections that benefit especially people like us, Latinos and people of color, African Americans, who are the ones who suffer the most the consequences of climate change and climate pollution. So this is a new year. 2020 will be a crucial year in the history, not only of the country, but the history of humanity. Let's think about that.
Javier Sierra, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.